During World War I and the 1920s there was a major expansion in industry. The availability of jobs attracted African Americans from the southern United States. Between 1910 and 1930, the African American population of Chicago increased dramatically, from 44,103 to 233,903. This great migration had an immense cultural impact, called the Chicago Black Renaissance, part of the new Negro movement, in art, literature, and music. Continuing racial tensions and violence, such as the Chicago race riot of 1919, also occurred. The ratification of the 18th Amendment to the Constitution in 1919 made the production and sale, including exportation, of alcoholic beverages illegal in the United States. This ushered in the beginning of what is known as the gangster era, a time that roughly spans from 1919 until 1933 when Prohibition was repealed. The 1920s saw gangsters, including Al Capone, Dion O'Banion, Bugs Moran and Tony Accardo, battle law enforcement and each other on the streets of Chicago during the Prohibition era. Chicago was the location of the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929, when Al Capone sent men to gun down members of a rival gang. North Side, led by Bugs Moran. Chicago was the first American city to have a homosexual rights organization. The organization, formed in 1924, was called the Society for Human Rights. It produced the first American publication for homosexuals, Friendship and Freedom. Police and political pressure caused the organization to disband. The Great Depression brought unprecedented suffering to Chicago, in no small part due to the city's heavy reliance on heavy industry. Notably, industrial areas on the South Side and neighborhoods lining both branches of the Chicago River were devastated. By 1933, over 50% of industrial jobs in the city had been lost, and unemployment rates amongst blacks and Mexicans in the city were over 40%. The Republican political machine in Chicago was utterly destroyed by the economic crisis, and every mayor since 1931 has been a Democrat. From 1928 to 1933, the city witnessed a tax revolt, and the city was unable to meet payroll or provide relief efforts. The fiscal crisis was resolved by 1933, and at the same time, federal relief funding began to flow into Chicago. Chicago was also a hotbed of labor activism, with unemployed councils contributing heavily in the early Depression to create solidarity for the poor and demand relief. These organizations were created by socialist and communist groups. By 1935, the Workers' Alliance of America began organizing the poor, workers, the unemployed. In the spring of 1937, Republic Steel Works witnessed the Memorial Day Massacre of 1937 in the neighborhood of East Side. In 1933, Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak was fatally wounded in Miami, Florida, during a failed assassination attempt on President-elect Franklin D. Roosevelt. In 1933 and 1934, the city celebrated its centennial by hosting the Century of Progress International Exposition, World's Fair. The theme of the fair was technological innovation over the century since Chicago's founding.